Oh, hang on. Okay, we're live now.
Right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Audit Committee. I am Councillor Brian Williams, Vice Chairman of the committee, and I will be chairing today's meeting in the absence of Councillor Peter Adams. I am obliged to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Members of the public will be able to hear the audio of the meeting and view the papers shown on the screen. This meeting is being held using remote technology, and should any committee members experience technical difficulties during the meeting, they should contact the designated IT officer on the number that they are already aware of. Everybody is requested to mute their microphones unless asked to speak. It does say only use the chat function to indicate the desire to speak, but I am happy to take a wave on the screen. But do not use your chat function for anything else, so that we may be clear who is asking to speak, and the debate has to be heard by those listening to the audio feed. At the start of the meeting, I will ask members of the committee to confirm their presence and any disclosable pecuniary interests they may have in any of the items on the agenda. I will ask everyone that speaks during the meeting, including members of the committee and the officers, to introduce themselves each time before they speak. This is so those listening may know who is speaking. So we now move to the roll call and the disclosable pecuniary interests. Members are reminded to disclose any pecuniary interest in any matters to be discussed, which is not included in the register of interests, and they must leave the meeting prior to the matter being discussed. Now I will read out each member's name and ask them to confirm presence and confirm if they have any interests. Well, we know Peter Adams has apologised. Michael Wood.
Michael Wood, Councillor Michael Wood, Worfield Division, no interest to declare, Chairman.
Councillor Chris Mellings, if he's with us. No. Ian Jones. I think you're still muted, Aaron.
Councillor Owen Jones, present and nothing to declare.
Thank you. Is Councillor Gerald Dakin with us? No. He would have been a substitute if he'd been with us. Okay, I shall now turn to the items on the agenda. I suppose I ought to say that I'd better declare, before we move to that, I'd better declare that I have, as chair, that I have no pecuniary interest. So we'll now go to the items on the agenda. Apologies. Any apologies for absence? You're muted.
Michelle Dawson, Committee Officer. We've received an apology from Councillor Peter Adams.
Okay, we'll receive that apology. Disclosure of pecuniary interest we've already dealt with. The minutes. We are to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 17th September 2020. As I wasn't present at this meeting, would a member please move that the minutes of the Audit Committee held on the 17th September, as have been circulated with the agenda papers, be signed as a correct record?
I move, Chairman, Councillor Michael Wood. I move that you accept the minutes of the meeting as written.
Councillor Owen Jones, second.
Thank you very much. Well, we've got a proposer and seconder. I will now accept these minutes as a true record. There cannot be anybody else who can indicate differently, because you are the only two people who were present at that meeting and are present at this one. Right, public question time. I can announce that no public questions have been received. Item 5 is member question times. I can announce that no member questions have been received. So we now move to the main items on the agenda. And the first one is the third line of assurance of external audit, the Redmond review briefing. And I'd ask Richard Percival from Grant Thornton if he will kindly introduce this himself and present this item. Richard.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, my camera is playing up. I will reappear in a second.
We can hear you okay.
That's good. That's good. Yes, thank you, Chair. So I know we've got quite a lot on the agenda today with the accounts, but I thought it was timely just to brief the committee on the outcome of the Redmond review, as this is likely to have quite a fundamental impact both on the accounts process in future and on the audit and how the audit works. So I'll be brief, and I'll assume that the presentation that's included in the pack, I'll take it as read. But just a few things that I wanted to flag up from the review. The review was published in early September, and basically the reason for the review was that the changes that were envisaged by the Local Audit and Accountability Act 2014 aren't actually working. That the increase in public transparency and in public accountability hasn't happened. So really there are two key issues that come out from this. The one is that the accounts are too complex, as I'm sure members are very aware of at the moment, having prepped for this meeting and looked at what are 200 pages of quite difficult technical information. The need to think about how local authorities can report their finances to their public stakeholders more effectively is quite important. The other key issue is about the audit and the audit fees, and the need to ensure that the audit market is sustainable, that the audit suppliers can deliver the level of audit that the public would expect of them at a fee that will enable them to do that on a sustainable basis. So I'll quickly and briefly go through some of the key findings of the review. The first was the lack of systems leadership. Basically the public audit field for local government is quite scrappy. There's public sector audit appointments are there. National Audit Office are in the frame, and the Finance Reporting Council. So Redmond is recommending the setting up of the Office of Local Audit Audit and Regulation and removal of PSAA and the FRC from the field, basically. So it's important to emphasise that that body's remit will be to provide that leadership. It will not be as the Audit Commission was. There's no intention to reinvent the Audit Commission. The second key finding was about audit fees, and as I've mentioned, the fees being too low. Redmond's recommended a revised fee structure to ensure that adequate resourcing can be deployed to audits in future. The skill set required for public audit is very scarce, and public audit as a career is become less attractive over time, and it's important that we redress that balance. The other key issue is about the audit timescale. Bear in mind this was before the impact of COVID, so he's talked about the July deadline and recommended that we go back to the September deadline, and that's key in terms of management of resource as well as ensuring sufficiency of audit. And I think importantly, the accounts are too complex, as I've said already, and Redmond's recommended both the simplification of the accounts, but also the production of an audited accounting summary that will be more of a public document that would enable a layperson to easily understand the key financial dynamics of the local authority. So our view is, as a firm, that we very much support the outcome of Redmond very much want to help with its implementation. We want sustainable arrangements to be put in place so that we can continue our presence in the public audit market. So that was all I was going to say, Chair, on Redmond, but I'm very happy to take any questions if members have any.
Thank you, Richard. I'm sure you're very happy indeed to hear the recommendation for an increase in the fee structure.
Yeah, but what I would emphasise about that, because is underpinning that is the importance, and I think we've talked about this before, the importance of the public audit profession being a profession that we can encourage people into, and they can see a career path through because they know that they can be in it for the long term.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Richard. I didn't intend to imply that I disagreed. It was just
yeah.
I could understand you being very enthusiastic about this. Yes. But the whole report does give a concern. I hadn't ever realised that audit was seen, certainly in the local authority sector, as having a detrimental effect on career prospects. That's a pretty damning statement. And there are a number of real concerns in this report, and I can see why there is a need for a new body, as long as it doesn't simply mean that we end up with 2 or 3 bodies. There will be a need to get rid of the role of the FRC in the local authority audit, and the other organisation, was it SIPFA that's involved in local authority audit?
The public sector audit appointments.
Probably yes, PS audit. Yeah. If you could just take, in fact, ask you to take us to what is page 19 on our papers. It's the detailed findings.
Yes.
I don't understand that the end of the first sentence, where audit report has been challenged in responses to the calls for views. The call for views. What does that actually mean?
Right. Bear with me, Chair. It might be a typo, so I'm just going to read it slowly and check it out. Yeah, I think it's the bit about the call for views, because I think what they're saying, so the ability of the audit committee is mostly lack independent technically qualified members to consider, and I think it's to effectively challenge audit reports rather than the call for views. So apologies for that. I think it's just a typo that slipped in. Oh,
right. I begin to it doesn't quite make sense.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Sorry, I should have checked that.
Yeah. Can I ask James to comment on the last line of this report, because I'm not clear where the full council will have a greater role, since they've just delegated to us the signing off of the accounts, and they're looking for a stronger interface between statutory officers and audit. Well, you, James, are always involved on audit. You come to the pre-meeting and as well as the audit committee. I'm not clear what we as a Shropshire Council do to meet that suggested requirement.
Thank you, Chair. James Walton here, Council's Director of Finance. Yeah, I mean, I agree your point, to be honest, in relation to the role that we have between officers and members, and the way in which that information in relation to audit committee in particular in terms of that, the internal control review and the reports through to council ensure that council as a meeting has a reasonable level of information provided from audit committee. We know that audit committee has the ability to review the accounts and goes into quite a bit of detail to ensure that the various issues are considered as part of that. And to suggest there needs to be a greater role, I mean, I suppose I'd just pass over to Richard and see whether there's anything in relation to his experience in other local authorities that would suggest a way forward in terms of either improving that interface or confirming that we're kind of doing what we need to already.
Well, in order to give Richard a moment to think about his response, I noticed Councillor Gerald Dakin has joined us. Have you seen the papers for this meeting, Gerald?
Yes, I have. Apologies, I had a bit of technical difficulty getting on. Yes, I've seen the papers, thank you.
Yes, would you therefore accept an invitation to join the committee today as a substitute for Peter Adams?
Absolutely, yes.
Michelle, can we record that, Michelle, please?
Yes, I've noted that. Thank you.
Right, Gerald. So you're fully a member of today's committee. Thank you for that. Now I go back to Richard for his thought out response to James.
Yeah, I think the starting point is clearly the Redmond review looks across the piece, so it looks across the whole of local government, and really going back to the first point, the call for views, the responses that this reflects. Redmond took soundings from a lot of key stakeholders, including local authority members, local authority officers, and obviously audit suppliers. On the specific point that James raised, yeah, I would agree that I think for Shropshire, you've got a good balance. I think as the Redmond review becomes implemented and we move forward, I guess new standards will emerge from that, and it will be a responsibility of the council to reflect whether it's meeting those new standards. I think that not always and everywhere, when you look at local authorities, and there's a range of local authorities to the very large metropolitan boroughs to the quite small districts, that interface between officers and members, and the interface between the statutory financial officer and the role of the auditor can be less than we would want it to be, and similarly the involvement of full council can be less than it needs to be in terms of public accountability. And an example I could quote on that is a new value for money arrangements are going to require the audit to produce the auditor's annual report, which will be required to be considered by full council and be a public document. So I think some of the feedback that has come back to Redmond is about the audit process isn't always as transparent as it could be to members of the public, which is a bit of a long answer to James's question, but I think in the immediate term there is nothing that I would point to for Shropshire that I think you need to change this in the immediate term.
Okay, we've noted that, have we, James? Just before I bring Michael in, can I welcome Councillor Chris Mellings, who has now joined us.
Thank you,
and hello, Chris. And in order to meet the statutory requirements, can I invite both you and Councillor Gerald Dakin to confirm that you've no pecuniary interests in any item on the agenda?
Yes, Chairman, apologies, I was late. I had technical difficulties trying to find the link, so apologies for that. I can confirm that I've got no interest that I need to declare in the meeting this afternoon.
Gerald Dakin, nothing to declare, no pecuniary interest.
Thank you both. That brings us up to date on statutory requirements. I now go down back to Michael Wood, who wishes to comment.
Michael Wood, Worfield Division. Richard, you did give us a little bit of an indication at the last meeting that of some of the items that you've covered in this, and I was rather sort of and just accepting that this is an overview, I was rather concerned when I saw on page 14 that 40% of the audits had in actual fact failed to meet the required deadline for report in 2018 and 19, which must be a matter of concern to every elected councillor in the country, never mind ourselves. But if we then, Chairman, if I may go on to page 18 and 19, and it was there, you've asked a little bit of it already, but I was taken a little bit with on the top of page 19, and where it states the ability of audit committees, which mostly lack independent, technically qualified members, and I presume members should have a capital M, because we're talking about elected persons. And we then go on to talk about the involvement of full council, and I presume that should be a capital F and a capital C. That's in my way of putting it. But no one rushes, Richard. No one rushes to be a member of the audit committee. These are the hardy souls that have been around for some time, and each annual meeting there's never anyone gagging to involve themselves. When it comes to full council looking at the statement of accounts and signing them off as we used to, it's rarely ever a grand discussion on the matter. It's a few independent pieces that are pulled out before the chairman and the leader of the council actually signed them off. So I think in respect of there being a greater involvement of full council, I think that's a bit of wishful thinking, and especially given that council have just delegated the role of the audit committee to take over basically all of the responsibilities. But it does bother me when you state, and Redmond's picked it up, that there's mostly a lack of independent, technically qualified members. Well, I wouldn't, whilst I've been in business, and it's a bit of a while ago now, that I'm reasonably au fait, I would say to you that we're not going to get it any better than you've got it here in Shropshire. And I'd suspect that that's a replication across the whole country. We do our best with the help of seriously good officers, but by the sounds of things, given that we go back to page 14, where we're stating that 40% of the audits are not completed on time, this is a problem across the piece. But I think that Redmond, in actual fact, got some wishful thinking here on both of the items, both of the paragraphs, to be found on 19. We'll wait and see, I presume, what comes out of further consultation. I think those are the points that I really picked up on, Chairman, other than the little bit of levity that I always bring in on the matter of negotiated fees. And I'll say to you, Richard, it used to be one of the lovely parts and the bits of pleasure with Grant when we discussed fees. But that aside, the other points I think I'm quite serious about. Thank you, Chairman.
Chair, if I may respond to a few of those points. I take the points. I guess going back to the first point you made about the capital letters, I think the capital letter for members is quite, I mean, what I would say is that one of the issues is that the members of the audit committee do not necessarily need to be members of the local authority, and the appointment of an independent member or members to an audit committee can be a useful way to involve other stakeholders and pull in that expertise of a qualified accountant, for example. I think the other point that I would make is clearly Redmond is, as I said before, is a look across the piece. We do see, and I personally see, a great variety of I'm searching for the right word, but there are different qualities in each audit committee, and some audit committees discharge their functions much more effectively than others. So I accept absolutely the points you make about members, the audit committee not being top of members list as a committee to sit on, and I do think that we do need to think carefully about the public accountability role for full council, because it's not necessarily just about the accounts. We have, for example, just last week issued a report in the public interest at Croydon, and that raises some very interesting questions about the financial accountability role of the full council, as well as other issues. So I think there are, as I say, some wide variances across the piece that need to be considered.
Thank you, Richard. Now, Chris Mellings.
Back again, Chairman.
Yes.
I don't demur in any way, actual fact, Richard, about the finding of an independent person or person suitably qualified to join with the elected members on an audit committee. I don't demur from that at all. But what I would say to you, from the experience of this council, it's taken us 2 years to put together a remuneration panel. And I don't see there being any rush from the outside world to join what would be an audit committee. I'd like to think that we could do it, but I'm very, very sceptical about it. It almost seems, with some political parties having difficulty in fielding any candidates, never mind a full house, it almost seems as though local government these days is a very, very poor relation in attracting real quality operators. Plausible though it may, desirable though it may be, I don't think it will be a runner.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. Now, Chris Mellings has been asking me to call him in.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for that. Interesting discussion so far. I think it's the first thing to say probably is that the Redmond review is welcome. I don't think the issue of audit has been looked at since the changes were introduced a few years ago. So I think it's a sort of a timely opportunity to consider it. And I think for me, the overriding phrase through all this is probably one size doesn't fit all. And I think, as the conversation has already acknowledged this afternoon, that there's good and bad in all, if I can put it like that, and that there are issues perhaps in some parts of the country, but that's not reflective everywhere. I would certainly hope, whilst there's always room for improvement, that isn't the situation here in Shropshire. For one, although sometimes having external people and stakeholders involved as part of any council process, I would hope that in this instance it wouldn't be a mandatory requirement, and that the option is there if it feels that the particular area would benefit and it would add value to the process. I think we also have to remember, in terms of accountability, the responsibility lies with elected members. So elected members need to step up to the plate. We're very fortunate here in Shropshire that we've had a fairly consistent and stable committee membership, and that isn't partisan in any way. So for me, to a degree, that independence is already there, because as a committee, we've been prepared to challenge when we've had concerns about issues, and that's quite right. I think it's a valid point about the role for full council, and I think as much as anything, even if there is little debate or discussion, for the wider public, I think it's about that openness and transparency, so that not only can elected members, but the wider public and indeed stakeholders can see the issues and the topics that the committee have been considering, and I'm sure in the commentary where it talks about where there are serious issues, if there was a serious issue, I'm sure that if we felt it appropriate, we wouldn't have any hesitation in referring the issue to either to Cabinet or even to full council for discussion. And there have been instances in the past where actually reports from our committee have gone to Cabinet because we felt that there was sufficient concern. So I think while some of it is, or a lot of the report is welcome, I think there is some sort of caution, and I think that we perhaps, once the new framework, if indeed a new framework comes forward, we just need to think very carefully how we might be able to involve that in the work that we do without taking the place of what we do already, because I don't sense that some of the issues that are highlighted in the report, and it's a very readable report in about 70-80 pages, which is quite good for one of these documents. We don't suffer the same issues, but that's not to say that we shouldn't entertain sort of new suggestions and ideas. But we just need to be a bit careful, I think, how we do with that, because I think we have a pretty good way of working. But I acknowledge that you always need to keep that under review to make sure that it is delivering our role in the process and for the people of Shropshire that we all represent. Sorry, that's a bit long-winded, Chairman, but thank you for the opportunity there.
Oh, but every word was precious. Every word was precious. Now then, where are we with the Redmond? Where are we with the Redmond review, Richard? Has it been accepted by government?
It's been accepted by government. The principles of the Redmond review have been accepted by government. However, it will take time for changes to be made, and because some of the changes will require primary legislation, and particularly at the moment, the government's agenda is somewhat preoccupied with far more pressing matters. So we're not sure. The short answer is at the moment we're not sure what timescale we're looking to for this. I mean, from our perspective, and we have fed this back to MHCLG, the importance of putting the audit market on a sustainable position has to be a priority, because basically the market can't afford to lose any more suppliers. The intention was that new suppliers would come into the market, but what we're seeing is suppliers leave the market. And as I said, we very much want to stay in the market, but it's important that that sustainability is there.
Well, thank you very much. Unless there are any other comments, can I have a recommendation that we note the contents of the report?
Chairman, I'm happy, Councillor Michael Wood, I'm happy to note the contents of the report and seek a seconder, but I'd just like to ask Richard if he could just give us a stat that I think he gave us last time, just as a reminder, as to how many are now of the same position as he holds to actually sign off a set of council reports. And I think there was another instance you gave me, Richard, at the last time we spoke, was the average age of those so-called so qualified people, which was quite illuminating.
Yeah.
And I move, Chairman.
Would you like me to respond now, Chair, or?
Well, I think you better had, yeah.
Okay, yes. So you're testing my head for numbers here. I think from memory there is something like 94, 96 people that are what we call key audit partners in the country. However, about a third of those work for a supplier who's withdrawn from the market. So there's about 65-ish key audit partners, I think, in the country at the moment. In terms of the average age, I think the average age is above 50 for those people. So, you know, there is clearly a need to ensure that new blood is brought in.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Have I got a seconder for?
Yes, Chairman, Chris Melling's happy to second.
Right. Well, unless there are any objections, we will now accept the recommendation to note the contents of the report about the Redmond review. Right. Well, we now move to another external audit report, the County Pension Fund audit findings. Richard, the floor is yours again.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I will take the report as read and be brief. And I know some members of the committee also sit on the Pension Fund Committee, so we'll be aware of the contents of this. I've brought this report to you today for completeness' sake. As I say, it's already been to through the Pension Fund. In summary, the audit this year has been more challenging. And I mean that in two ways. It's been more challenging due to remote working and the issues that's generated. But it's also been more. We've put more challenge into the audit because of the valuation issues around investments because of the uncertainties due to COVID. The audit's complete. and I'm happy to say we're in a position to sign off once we complete the council's audit, which we'll come on to later in the meeting. I'm proposing that my opinion includes what we call an emphasis of matter on the material valuation uncertainties on some investments due to COVID. That is a typical of what we will be doing at all pension fund audits, and it reflects an uncertainty. It's not a qualification in the accounts in any way. It just brings the readers of the accounts attention to that particular matter. There's one unadjusted misstatement, i.e. something that we found that wasn't changed in the accounts, which is on page 12 of our report, of £14 million. And what this is an overstatement of asset valuations, and that's due to the timing of the valuation and how the market moved by the time we got to the year end. Although £14 million sounds like an awful lot of money, it's below our materiality threshold. And to put it into context, the pension fund held 1.8 billion in assets, so that 14 million is 0.75% of the value of the carrying value of the assets. So in relative terms, very, very low. I'd just finally quickly like to just thank the pension fund team for their help and support again this year. I mean, as I say, it's been a more challenging audit, and we do appreciate the support we get from them. That was all I wanted to say, Chair, but very happy to take any questions if members have them.
Are there any questions from members?
Move acceptance, Chairman. Councillor Michael Wood.
Is there a seconder?
Seconded, Councillor Owen Jones.
Thank you, Owen. So I'll now accept the recommendation to note the contents of the report, since no one else has indicated differently. Thank you, Richard. That's, I think, concludes your part of the. But we shall be glad if you will stay with us and hear the words of wisdom from the members in relation to the annual statement of accounts. James, we're now on the item 8. Would you like to introduce this item, please, and take us through it?
Thank you, Chair. James Walton, Council's Director of Finance. Yeah, I'm happy to take you through the covering report and the appendices. I will be brief, but just to mention that the third of those appendices is the audit findings report. So I'll hand over to Richard, who can take you through the detail of that. So the statement of accounts, the draft was seen by Audit Committee at the end of July earlier this year, and the revised statement of accounts is attached at Appendix 1. This is largely unchanged from the draft that committee saw in July, but where there are changes, those are set out in the covering report in Table 1, which is on page 3 of the actual report, and then in the section below that it just identifies what each of those amendments are and a summary in terms of the reasoning for that particular change. None of those, though, are particularly concerning, but if there are any questions on any of those, then we can deal with that. The second of the appendices is the annual governance statement. That is unchanged from the document that you saw in July, and then the third element is that audit findings report. So at the conclusion of this, we will have the set of accounts ready, and we'll also need to get the letter of representation signed off, which is the letter that goes back to confirm that everything is in place from the council's side. So if Richard is happy, I'll hand over to him just to take you through where we are in relation to the audit, which is now substantially complete, but I think there's just a few small areas outstanding, and he can take you through where we are in relation to the audit conclusion being reached and those outstanding elements to be dealt with.
Thank you, James. Well, Richard, there's the invitation.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, James. So I'm on page 223 onwards of the supplementary pack, just from navigation point of view. I'm going to ask Mary Wren, to brief you on the accounts audit and the outcome of the accounts audit, and then she'll hand back to me. And I just wanted to highlight some of the key messages from our value for money work. Before I hand over to Mary, just in terms of the overall status of the audit, so we're proposing, I mentioned this issue of emphasis of matter when I talked about the pension fund audit, a similar issue for the council's audit, proposing to include an emphasis of matter on the valuation of land and buildings, which we highlight on page 226. We have got a couple of outstanding issues, one on the shopping centres valuation and the other on the impact of the pension fund valuations in the accounts and how those need to be reported. These are minor issues. These are issues of wording, and I note from the committee report that James has delegated authority to deal with minor changes of wording. So there may be some minor changes of wording, but nothing of significance. In terms of the group accounts audit that we talk about, we're done on that. So I'm comfortable where we are with that. My intention is, and again, it's in the report, to issue the opinion by Friday of next week. That's what I'm aiming to achieve. At which point I'll hand over to Mary and let her talk you through some of the key points from the accounts audit.
Chairman, can I just interrupt for a moment, just to say that I don't think any member has got the whole report unless you've got it on screen. So that whilst I'm making notes of the pages and the comments that you're making, Richard, I don't have it anything other than having read the first part of the report. I don't know whether anyone else has got the whole thing printed.
Yeah, it came through in the post a couple of days ago.
Still not got it today.
Yeah, mine came yesterday. I've got the whole report in the post yesterday.
Would you like us to share the report on screen?
Well, yes, thank you, Mary. Welcome.
Just a recommendation. I've got the recommendation.
Oh, sorry. Who is it speaking?
Sorry, it's Michelle Dawson.
Hello, Michelle. Yeah.
I think we did discuss that before the meeting started, Michelle and I did, along with Johan, agreed that the recommendations were the key thing that we as a committee needed to see. But I haven't seen the whole report, Chairman, because, you know, I haven't got a printer, as you full well know, and to print this lot off is if anyone was trying to do it at home, would be there for weeks. So I'm sorry if all I can do is make notes of the appendices that have already been discussed.
Michelle, can I ask if the reports were sent to all members, so far as you know?
As far as I know, they were, yes. I received mine this morning.
Oh, it's true. It isn't really terribly satisfactory to find that the system has not been able to produce the reports in time for all members to see them. It's particularly difficult now that none of us are in Shire Hall, because whereas we could previously have picked them up from our pigeonholes, we're now reliant on Royal Mail to get them to us, and you in turn in Shire Hall need to be certain that you're getting them out in time for Royal Mail to action that. Anyway, having said that, hopefully as a note for the next committee meeting,
obviously we've been this particular report was sent out to follow, so apologies that it did come out late, but they are all available electronically, so it is possible for any of the members just to at least get it up on the screen and have a look at the document, and that's certainly how I'm viewing the document at the moment.
It's readable online, Chairman, but as I've said in previous forums, you know, to look at this lot on a tiny screen is certainly not conducive to good order.
I concur with you, Michael, but we are where we are this time, so I'm now going to ask Mary to carry on with her review of the item. Mary.
Thank you, Chair. Mary Wren, Audit Manager at Grant Thornton, and I know we all enjoy Richard talking, but I thought he really did deserve a little break. So I'll take you for a gentle saunter through the audit findings report. The pages that I'll refer to will be the pages of our report, so in the bottom right-hand corner, so for reference. As Richard said, I'll take you through the opinion side of the audit, and I'll come back to Richard, and Richard will take you through the value for money element. I'm sure you're all aware that our audit is split into two distinct areas. We're required to give our opinion on the financial statements, but also satisfy ourselves regarding proper arrangements for value for money. So I'll start with the overview of the financial statements, and that's to refer to our report is on page 3. Now, obviously, this has been a significant changes to the way we all live and work. And as I said at the previous committee, I'm pleased to say that everyone has remained healthy and fit throughout the process, which I think is just really important to reflect on that. And long may it continue, I think, as we're entering a new phase of various tier structures, and you know, hopefully everyone remains healthy. So specifically in relation to the audit and COVID in particular, it has had a significant impact on the way we work, and that's not just for yourselves, that's across all audit clients. But I think the key point is that remote working, it has been a success. We have been able to obtain that evidence to support the statements. For example, with a lot of screen sharing, use of Teams, screenshots, but it has taken significantly longer than anticipated, and especially I think where there have been queries, and we've been used to being able to go and pop our head around the corner, talk to the finance team, and that's where we've really noticed the difference of not having that on tap on-site team where we could just go through those queries. But we are in a position, you know, within the next week to give our opinion, which is from my own experience and other clients, you know, that you will be my first opinion that I am giving. So that's just a reflection. I'm not giving, obviously Richard's giving, but that's just a reflection really of how well it has worked here. So if I could just take you to page 4, and as Richard mentioned, our audit is substantially complete. However, there are some areas which we just need to work through, mainly from an administration point, but one of the key areas is the information we receive from an external value in relation to the shopping centres. But once that information does come, it is rather a process-driven administrative item. There's also another weird scenario, I suppose, where Richard, as engagement lead for the pension fund, will be busy writing to himself to provide relevant assurances for the council audit. But again, that is largely an administration point. I'm not going to go over the same point as Richard has. Page 6 states we're basically planning to give an unmodified opinion, and it really, the emphasis of matter regarding the property, plant and equipment estimation uncertainty is just to point out to the reader of the accounts that this is an important area to look at. It doesn't mean a qualification, and it is something that is very common in all of the audits that I am involved with and across the country for those councils with material, property, plant and equipment balances. On page 7 of our report, that sets out our levels of materiality. Now that hasn't changed from either the planning audit plan that we issued, but also in light of COVID that was revisited. Are there any changes to the overall risk of the authority? And that hasn't changed, and it remained throughout the audit at £8.7 million. I'm not going to take you through the full detail of the significant risks that we identified, other than that the work that we've completed is on page 8 to 15, and there have been no significant issues raised in relation to those significant risks. One of the other key areas which we need to review is management's assessment of going concern, and obviously this year there have been additional procedures which we've looked at from a perspective of COVID too. that's detailed on page 16. We've reviewed council's budget setting process and the arrangements and the updates really that have been, you know, very regular given the changes that have been happening in relation to COVID, funding changes to income streams, and link that to work on the council's cash flow statement. And our review needs to focus on really on 12 months following signature of the account. So really we've looked to the end of November 2021 and we haven't raised any issues in relation to going concern for the authority. So as I said, Richard will take you through VFM, but I'll just cover off some of the other opinion points and the ethical items. So if I could just take you through to page 23. I mean, I think it's key here that just summarises our perspective on independence, and in particular the other areas of work that we undertake for you, and that just sets out the fees that are there in relation to for example, the housing benefits audit work that we complete. And if I can just take you through to the adjusted misstatements, there are no unadjusted misstatements, which is great. You know, the audit team, the council have changed all recommended amendments made by audit, and they are on pages 27 to 28. And as James alluded to, they are minor changes really to disclosures within the financial statements. So I'm pleased to say that there are no unadjusted misstatements, as the letter of representation would need to refer to those, and as a committee you would need to agree to any unadjusted misstatements. So we're not in that position. So I'll leave it there from an opinion perspective, and just happy to take any questions, and then Richard will take you through the value for money pages. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Are there any questions? I have none. I wonder if any members have.
Yes, Chairman, Chris Mullings, if that's possible. Just one brief one. It's going back to page 4, and I hear what Mary said in terms of the ability to be able to pop next door, as it were, to see the finance team to query things, which fully understand. But in the middle of the page, it talks about remote working has highlighted the complexity of some of the council's underlying financial systems. And I just wonder if it's possible just to sort of say a little bit more about that complexity. Is that something that's unique to Shropshire, or is that just in relation to the, as you've indicated, being able to pop in and see the finance team to sort of query anything? I'm just wondering if the complexity issue obviously it does in this instance, make life a little bit more difficult, but I'd just like to understand a little bit more around that issue, if that's possible.
Just let me stop you. Just let me stop you there a minute. Can everybody find page 4, or can we see page 4 so that we know exactly what Chris is referring to? Stony silence.
Well, I only had these papers this morning, so I haven't had a chance to get these pages properly sorted, but none of those numbers mean very much to me.
Yeah, but page 4, you see, the difficulty always is, we have this every meeting, that our reports are, the council page numbering doesn't correspond, for obvious reasons, with the external auditors page numbering. Their numbering is in what would be effectively the top right hand corner, or the bottom, depends which way you turn it, the bottom right hand corner of this page, and I don't know whether Mary can put that on the screen.
Well, I'm not sure that I can, Chair, but I can read out the relevant paragraph if that would help.
Yes, do that, please.
Okay, Mary Wren, Grant Thornton, audit managers. So the page 4 are the headlines, and the paragraph that is being referred to, I believe, it states remote working has highlighted the complexity of some of the council's underlying financial systems. It has taken additional time to explain the audit trail of transactions remotely. We estimate that combined with the impact of remote working, this has extended the core final accounts audit process by 2 to 3 weeks, plus additional review procedures by the audit manager and engagement lead. This will impact on the final audit fee. So that's the relevant paragraph. And just to sort of elaborate on that, this isn't something that is unique to Shropshire, certainly isn't. I mean, I'm sure you appreciate the complexity of local government financial statements, and I think we're quite a distance away from a world where you extract transactions from the ledger and they just appear into the accounts. There are a number of steps that have to happen for them to be in the correct format for the financial statements. So as part of that journey through the trying to agree what comes directly from the financial ledger to the financial statements, we have to go through each step. Now, usually how that process would work would be one of the audit team would sit with the relevant person, usually, Nikki, in the accounts team, and would take us through that process and show us on screen. So it has taken longer because every step of the way we need to gain that assurance that through information provided by the entity that information is genuine and has been extracted from the ledger via video link, via date stamp of reporting. So it is globally an extra processes we need to go through to make sure that the information that we're receiving is scrutinised, and we're happy that it's genuine. Obviously, we haven't had any issues with that, but we do have a duty to make sure that those reports are genuine, where we would otherwise just sit with a relevant person. But I must say, this is certainly not this is common across all audits, and has taken significant additional time this year. Also links with other departments as well. It's often a lot of information is drawn from other departments, for example, payroll. So we've had much more involvement maybe with departments which we would usually go through finance. So sometimes it's been quite new to other departments to have that conversation directly with us as auditors, but it's certainly not something that is unique to Shropshire at all. Does that help?
Yeah, that's helpful. Just as a follow-up, obviously it's been a creature of circumstances this year, but obviously staff at Shire Hall are being encouraged to work from home, etc., etc. So presumably this may be the normal process going forward, or is there intention, depending on circumstances, that there will be the opportunity to sit alongside or share a screen or whatever it happens to be to improve the process in future years?
Thank you, Mary Wren, Grant Thornton Audit Manager. I think there are things that we will all take from this process which have been real eye-openers and we want to use going forward. For example, maybe audit committees, things like that. But I think remote working, from my own perspective, is here to stay. Maybe not fully, but I think certainly in part, as organisations maybe look to change, the way that their offices work, their technology works, and it really has forced been a driver for change for many places. So I think it is definitely here in the short to medium term, in my opinion, and certainly the way that we're working at Grant Thornton. But it really is nice to sit face to face and meet people, and I think that really want to keep that as part of a key part of our world, because it's one of the parts that I really enjoy as my job is sitting down and really just talking face to face with someone. But given where we are, I think going forward it will form a larger part of our world.
It's just Mary, you're making me cry. We shall never meet, Mary.
Oh, please don't say that. That would be the worst thing in the world, wouldn't it?
Gerald, I think you would like to come in.
Yes, I hope I don't confuse this too much, but I'm looking at page 22 on the paper I had this morning, and it's current and future prospects, and the impact of the delivery of the 2021 budget significantly is problematic. It could cost us a budget pressure of just under 36 million. The government has provided 2 tranches of funding to help support local authorities, and this totals 17,918, leaving a shortfall of 17.8 million still to be funded. Now, I don't know when this was written, but I had a thing come through from Catch Up in July, which said that we'd hope to get off the government somewhere in the middle of about 32 million. So,
Are you? I'm going to ask Richard if that's you're finished, Gerald.
well, that so far, yes.
Right. We'll come back if you want to have a comeback. Richard, are you familiar with the point Gerald's making?
I think what the councillors raised in their issues around our value for money conclusion work. So if I may, rather than answer the question straight away directly, if I talk you through the value for money section of the report, it may answer the question, councillor, but if not, I'm quite happy to come back to the question. Is that appropriate?
That's fine, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
is there anything else on this report then that this part of the report that we wanted to question or talk about? No.
There is an issue. I've got Chris Mallings again. Sorry, there is an issue, but I think it's more relative to the recommendation. So perhaps I'll leave it to when we come to look at the recommendation, if that's okay.
Okay, fine. Well, in that case, we'll move to the value for money section of the report, if we may, Richard.
Thank you, Chair. And just I know we have various issues about accessing the report. I'm using the version of the pack that is the supplementary pack that is on the council's website, and on that pack I'm on page 241 of the supplementary pack. So hopefully that will help with navigation. That page is headed up value for money and has a big triangle in the bottom left hand corner of that page.
Yeah.
Okay. So on value for money, we focused, so as Mary's explained, with audits, if you like, in two parts. We audit the financial statements. We're also required under the Code of Audit Practice to give a view on value for money and reach a conclusion on the authority's arrangements for achieving value for money. And we do that by focusing on particular risks. This year we've focused on one big key risk, which is financial sustainability, which we included in our audit plans. And straight away, I think it's important that I say we're proposing to issue an unqualified value for money conclusion, which means that there are no issues that we feel restrict our opinion in any way. And in reaching that conclusion, we've considered really two key aspects. One is the outcome of the 2019-20 financial year, and the other is the impact of the COVID pandemic on financial planning and the impact it's having in the 2021 financial year. So I'm now on page 242 of the pack. So in terms of 2019-20, good outcome overall, and a position very close to where you set yourself to achieve, 1.6 million overspend of controllable budgets. Within that, service overspends of around 13 million, children's services and place being the pressure points, mitigated by corporate savings and underspends from corporate, which is great. However, James, as the Section 151 officer, as we know, reported in July that the ongoing capacity of corporate funds to address budget overspends is becoming increasingly limited. So we've made a recommendation that the use of non-recurrent measures to balance the annual budget is not a sustainable position for the authority, and the council is going to need to deliver identified savings to develop further schemes to support its financial position going forward. In a world before COVID, that would be a big challenge. In the world that we find ourselves in, clearly there's an added challenge due to the impact of COVID and the uncertainties about future funding. So if I move on to financial strategy, and I think this may in some ways hopefully answer the point that was made earlier. COVID was clearly a huge unanticipated hit for the council, as it has been for all local authorities. And standing back from the finances, the role that local authorities are playing in the national response to COVID is absolutely critical. For Shropshire, it came, as you know, hot on the heels of a major flooding crisis. So the authority had already been stressed before we moved into the COVID phase. In our work, in considering the financial impact of all that, we consider the July and September updates of the financial plan, but we're very aware, and I think it picks up the point that was made, things are still moving. This is still much more of a developing situation. In July, you'd received around £18 million of funding from government, and you'd identified an £18 million further gap. So we've got about 36 million overall, 18. Now, included tranche 4, the council's received something in excess of £20 million, £22 million, with a further £5 million of loss of income money available. So somewhere in the region of £27 million. That said, you still face, as I'm sure you're aware, a significant financial challenge. 2021-2 is anticipated to have a funding gap of over £30 million, with a similar gap for 22-23. There's a planned use of reserves, but clearly the scope to use your reserves diminishes each time you use those reserves to close the gap. So our view is that overall the council's responded well to the COVID challenge, but we do need to be clear with you that in our view you still face a major financial challenge over the next 2 years. We're satisfied that you've got the current position covered with your reserves and balances, but obviously that's not an inexhaustible pot. So that summarises where we are for value for money. Just quickly before I hand over, a couple of other points. Mary's mentioned the issue about fees. Clearly, the audit fee in terms of remote working will have an impact, and I'll talk to James about that, and I'm sure we'll be informing the committee of the outcome of those discussions. But before I finish, I think the most important thing for me to finish on is for us to thank the finance team and the work that they put into enabling us to get the audit completed this year. It started off with saying it's been a challenging year. We've had to be flexible from both sides to make this thing work this year, and we do very much appreciate the support and assistance we've had from the finance team to make this happen and get us to this position. At that point, Chair, I'm quite happy to take any questions that members may have.
I'm sure we'll all say hear, hear to those last remarks relating to the finance team. As another comment, none of us, I'm sure, are in the slightest doubt about the challenging nature of the financial situation as we go forward. Now, I'll go back to Gerald, and then I'll go to James. Gerald, did you get your question answered, or would you like to make the point again?
No, I think that's a very good answer to a rather clumsy question, but thank you very much.
Right, you're happy on that one. James, do you want to say anything at the moment?
Thank you, Chair. James Walton, Council's Director of Finance. Yeah, I'll just literally re-emphasise some of the points that Richard's made. You know, in terms of where we are at the moment in the current year, the difficulties that we have in relation to the kind of the overarching unsustainability of the long-term budget, and this is around the funding mechanism that's in place within local government at the moment, fair funding as an approach to trying to manage and tackle the imbalance and unfairness of the current funding formula has been delayed and deferred for a number of years, and with the current COVID-19 requirements, that's been put back another year. So we're relying on one-off funding for this year. That's been extended into next year as well. The spending review due later in the year is only going to be a 1-year spending review rather than a 3-year spending review. So everything is kind of on hold, which in the short term means that ironically we kind of have more certainty around being able to set the budget for next year, because at least we now know, or we will shortly know, the game that we're playing in relation to the 2021-22 financial year. But of course, what that removes is the ability to plan on a more long-term basis for an overarching sustainable position. We need that change in government funding. We need to have the assurance that the impact of COVID, the financial implications of COVID on the council are being managed and dealt with separately. And at the moment, in the current financial year, we can demonstrate that they are. The additional costs in this year are being met by the additional funding. But we need, that needs to be kind of assured going forward. We need a change in relation to that overall funding package in relation to local government. And then the third element is the bit that relates to us as a local authority and making sure that everything we do is done efficiently and appropriately and of the necessary quality to deliver the outcomes for the council as a whole. But it's all of those elements together which we're trying to manage, and certainly for the short term we can give the assurance that those things can be managed, but into the longer term we absolutely can't.
Well, I think that we can understand that situation. Any other comments on the report? Or are members satisfied that they understand the situation? In that case, if there are no more speakers, the recommendations are at paragraph 2 on page 1 of the report. There are 3 recommendations. If I go to them, A, B and C. Members can read through those recommendations. Did Chris, did you want to have a word about something on the recommendations?
Yes, Chairman. Chris Mullings, member of the Audit Committee. Thank you for coming back to me. It was just to say it wasn't to, I'm not disagreeing with the recommendation or changing the wording, but obviously the covering report that has come out has listed the items where there have been amendments to the annual accounts statements. There's obviously been a reference this afternoon to some minor word changes on a couple of areas. In terms of the Director of Finance and the Vice Chair of the committee signing those off, not a problem with that. But for completeness, in terms of tracking through everything, if once that that process has been finalised and the wording agreed, I'm not saying the whole document, but if it's possible to notify members of the committee of those further word changes, that'll be very helpful just to sort of track that through for us. I know they'll be in the documents, but having to plough through pages and pages isn't a good use of anybody's time. But if it's possible, just an email to say that these are the changes, additions, what have you, then it just gives us the track through right to the very end. But I'm happy with the recommendations, but I'd just like to see the final wording once it's been approved. Thank you, Chairman.
Can Chris have that assurance? Somebody say yes.
Certainly from our perspective, yeah, it would be easy enough to flag up wording changes, and just really the reassurance to the committee that, I'd re-emphasise that wording changes that we will be asking for will be of a minor nature. They won't, they'll be literally sentences in the supporting notes of the accounts.
No, that's right. It's just for completeness, really. As I say, we've had a report that tracks through those changes, so it's just to see that through, just so that we're clear of what exactly it is. But I'm happy with your assurance in terms of the minor wording issue, so not an issue there. Thank you.
So I take it you're moving the 3 recommendations, Chris.
Chris Reynolds, yes, happy to do that, Chairman. Happy to move both A, B, and C.
Is there a seconder, please? Gerald?
Ewan Jones.
Oh, Ewan, yes. Ewan seconds, right. Been proposed and seconded, so I'll now accept the recommendation since nobody's indicated differently. Thank you very much. So it only remains now for me to thank Richard and Mary for their attendance on us today and their clear taking us through the recommendations or through the report. I need to thank the officers, James, whom we've heard from, Kerry Pilaski, Pete Chatterton and Ross Bridges, who would have been there to give us the benefit of their vast experience had it been necessary to call upon them. And finally, to you, the members, for your attendance at this meeting. I hope to see you all at the next meeting of the Audit Committee, which will be held on the 10th of December 2020 at 1:30 p.m. Make that your red letter day as we move towards Christmas. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Chairman.
everyone.
Take care, everyone. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Chair.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.